Alright guys, this is Cadmus. This video is about a few reasons, I don't know how many yet, why Dark Souls 2 is much better than Dark Souls 3. I made a similar video a little bit back, and I left out the main thing I wanted to talk about. I don't really make videos, and usually don't talk if I do. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to go over it again a little bit better. So I started out on Dark Souls 2. Then went to Dark Souls 1, and then when Dark Souls 3 came out, jumped on board, and I love all three games, but going from Dark Souls 2 to Dark Souls 1 was okay. You know, I loved that you couldn't fast travel in Dark Souls 1, even though I started off having the luxury of fast traveling, like you do in Dark Souls 2. I was still able to enjoy Dark Souls 1, I mean, more than any other game, almost. Not quite as much as Dark Souls 2, just because I love the style, and so many people shit on Dark Souls 2. They say, oh, it was made by the B team. The game is fantastic. It has the best armor sets, the best weapons, the best combat, you know, the power stancing, just the variety of attacks. You know, when you attack with a mace or an axe, let's compare Dark Souls 1 and 2. 1 and 3. When you use a mace or an axe, all your attacks are pretty much vertical. They slam straight at the ground over and over. I mean, it's kind of a stupid attack. You know, you just hit the ground. That doesn't make sense. In Dark Souls 2, your first strong attack will hit the ground, but then it'll do a vertical or horizontal slash, rather than just a repeated downswing like this, which is Dark Souls 1 and 3. But let's go over the thing that I missed last time. And it has to do with the armor, and that's Poise. Everybody knows they took Poise out of Dark Souls 3. It took me forever to figure out, when I started the game, why the fuck, you know, I was wearing a heavy armor set. I'm like, man, I have no Poise. What, you know, what do you need to use? Havels to have a little bit of, you know, to resist a dagger attack? What do you need? The best armor you can get? Until finally, you know, it started coming up slowly. Hey, they took Poise out. They said they're not going to add it in, or they are going to add it in, or they're going to leave it how it was. And that's what they did. They left it as it is with, you know, hyper armor, whatever you want to call it. But Dark Souls 3 became just a PvP damage per second game. The PvP combat, at least. It was no long. There's no tanking. There's no defense. You know, the damage absorption. I'll get to the worst part about it, the part that literally makes me sick when I play Dark Souls 3, which I still enjoy the game, but this part just makes me fucking pissed. But anyways, yeah, I mean, it's just all about damage per second now. Faster attacks, no poise. It's just about changing blows. You know, I understand what they were going for. You know, that's what a lot of people like. But why get rid of the ability to be a tank? You know, there's no reason to use heavy armor, other than a little bit of absorption. And that's the other thing, the absorption level, even the best armor in Dark Souls 3, it doesn't take away nearly as much damage as the heavy armors in Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2. It's almost, you know, people have done tests, the higher you get, the lower the effect is. I think it's you know, I'm not exactly sure of the math, but as you go up, you know, higher and higher absorption, the amount that increases, it gets smaller and smaller, from, like, you know, maybe 30% to 29 to 28 to 27 as you go up. And here's the big one. Okay, they got rid of the ability to upgrade armor in Dark Souls 3. That was the other thing. It took me forever to find out, when the hell do I get to upgrade my armor? And after getting, I don't know, maybe a quarter through the game, I realized you can't. And that is fuck for somebody who not just, you know, I've never worn Havels in Dark Souls 2 or 3. I don't wear the heaviest armor, but I usually use pretty heavy armor. And I like to be able to find a set that may not be the best, but you can upgrade it. Put all your Titanite into your armor. You know, screw damage per second with your weapon. I don't want that at 10. I want my favorite armor. You know, by the time I'm close to the end, I want that at plus 10. And I want to do that with multiple sets. Dark Souls 1 got rid of the ability to do that. You cannot upgrade armor, so you're basically stuck with, you know, if you want to use a set that gives you decent absorption, which still doesn't add up to much, you have to use one of the bigger, heavier sets. You cannot take the Elite Knight set or the Knight set or nameless night set as they call it in Dark Souls 3, and make it better. It's a medium to light piece of armor, and that's how it's going to be. You cannot make it stronger. That, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that just infuriates me. That was the main thing that I wanted to talk about this time, was the poise and the inability to upgrade your armor, and then kind of onto the fact that the reduction of damage you take that the armor gives you is minuscule. There's really, I forgot what site I was on to look at the, somebody did some really comprehensive testing, and from using like a light piece, like a cloth armor set, then a medium set to a heavy set, they did some tests, and it was like a minuscule amount. I mean, maybe they've changed it. You know, the game's been out for a little while now, but it was almost non-existent from medium to light, then medium to heavy. So there was no reason to wear heavy armor, because then you just can carry less weapons. Oh, that's another thing I want to talk about. Is in Dark Souls 1 and 2, look how many rolls you can get. Oh, you can get a couple of rolls. What was that, 6, 5? I don't know, I wasn't counting. That's, you know, I'm pretty high level. I got decent stamina, whatever the stat is, endurance. Dark Souls 3, I think Dark Souls 1's even less. You can roll maybe like 3 times and you're out. And that's great. That makes sense. This isn't a, you're not playing a ninja game. You know what I mean? You're not it's not a game about you're not some super agile fucking cat woman. You know, you can be in Dark Souls, you know, if you go all light, straight up endurance, you know, have really high stamina. But in Dark Souls 3, I think it's like when your endurance is at like 30, you can roll, 20 times maybe. Literally non-stop. That's all. In PvP, this is it. It's a fast roll, fast roll. Nobody... When I play Dark Souls 1 and 2, I fat roll. In PvP, Dark Souls 2, for some reason, in 1 and 3, I'm not that great, but in Dark Souls 2, I probably win 80% of my matches. And I fat roll, usually. I don't with this set I have on here, but I usually fat roll. You know, with using reasonable, you know, pretty heavy armor. Yeah, and I do well fat rolling. But in Dark Souls 3, if you're trying to fat roll, and I did, I wore the Black Iron set. You know, went with all the damage absorption rings you can get, you know, to kind of be a tank. And you have no poise. The damage reductions. That's it. There's another thing. I just, you know, I keep kind of remembering things as I go here. To make it even, as going back to my point about Dark Souls 3 has just become a PvP, damage per second, fast attack kind of type of game. They proved it, because every stat of damage absorption, especially rings, but anything that has to do with damage, absorbing damage, reducing damage, when you go into PvP or you receive damage from another player, it reduces, you know, say if you got the Ring of Steel protection, and it gives you... let's see here. Increases your physical defense by, I don't know how many points it is. 40 points, 60 points, 70 points. If that ring increases your resistance by 10% in Dark Souls 3, when you go into PvP, it reduces that down to, I think 1% or something like that. It reduces it by like 90% efficiency. And that's with everything. That's with the blue Tearstone ring. That greatly increases your defense. In this game, in Dark Souls 1 and 2, I think it's 50%. It increases, you know, when you get down to with that ring on, really low health, you get 50% more damage absorption. So if you have it, one hit's going to kill you, you're not dead now. That ring, in PvP and in PvE, that ring saved your life. It made it worth it. But in Dark Souls 3, they cut that reduction from damage received by other players by up to like 90%. I think it might have even been higher than 90%. It might have been like 98%. Again, this is another really thorough test a bunch of people did. But this one guy was, you know, he knew physics and math and all that shit. And he worked the numbers out after hours and hours and hours of testing. What the hell is the point? You know, I had my character all decked out with everything you could for defense. And I was wondering, I'm like, geez, I don't seem to be taking much less damage with all this stuff. You know, I'm fat rolling. trying to be a tank, I have no poise, and it doesn't seem effective. So I looked it up, started doing some research, and spells too. They did that with spells. The hexes and the miracle that increases your defense in PvP. That efficiency is reduced by like 90%. So it's literally absolutely fucking useless. Defense in Dark Souls 3 is just... I just can't believe they did that. It doesn't make sense, you know, and I get they were steering more towards, I think, like how... I've never played Bloodborne, but, you know, Dark Souls 3 looks like just like Bloodborne. You know, just reskinned. And, I think that game's more about damage per second, too. You know, kind of faster, you can roll more and all that. And that's what they turned Dark Souls 3 into. And that's a shame, because to me, I think to a lot of people, but I know to me, I don't care as much about the damage I put out. You know, I'm not worried about upgrading I rarely ever upgrade a weapon to plus 10, except for maybe like a one-handed sword, because it's not going to be that overpowered. But they took that away, you know. I think a lot of people were pissed. Oh, I know a lot of people were and probably still are pissed, because they like to play the same way. They like to get an armor set and increase it, make it have strong defenses. I restarted playing Dark Souls 3 again, and I found the Nameless Knight set, which is the regular knight set in Dark Souls 1 and 2. And they changed that into pretty much a medium armor. And maybe it is classified as medium on these ones as well. But, you know, the defense is, you can buy the first set of chainmail from the handmade at the shrine. And the Nameless Knight armor set has lower stats than the base chainmail that you can get for 600 souls. It has worse defense, and you can't do anything about it. In this game, you can take the Elite Knight set, which I got right here, that has pretty shitty stats, you know, pretty shitty damage reduction, pretty low, and you can turn it into a pretty decent piece of armor. You know, you could put that on. You know, it may not be as high as the steel set, not nearly as high, but you could put that, or the Imperious set. There's a couple other cool sets that, you know, reasons why I think Dark Souls 2 has the best armor. These two sets are just fantastic. This Rusted Mastodon armor is one of my favorites. Cyan Knight has always been right up there. Kind of getting a little sidetracked here looking through these. Look at that beauty. They didn't add this into Dark Souls 3 either, which was a shame. That armor, steel armor. Yeah, you know what? I forgot what I was talking about now. I kind of got a little excited here. Oh yeah, I was just saying you could take an armor set, upgrade it all the way, and it still won't be fantastic, but it turned it into a pretty decent piece of armor. Then you can take some heavy gloves that look the same. You can mix it up, and then you have a character with very high poise, high defense. You can't do that in Dark Souls 3. You can't. You cannot in PvP and in PvE, but mainly PvP. You cannot be a tank. It just can't happen. They get rid of the ability to do that, and that just gets me worked up every time I think about it, because that's what I like to do in this game. High defenses. You know, I don't turtle. I don't use a great shield, but I like the heavier armor, and I like to be able to resist damage, and they took that away from me, motherfuckers. So I don't know. You know. Not many people will probably see this video or not listen through my ranting. But if you feel the same way, you know, let me know in the comments or something. And kind of curious if other people still are worked up about it like I am, or if everyone just kind of said, that's how it is. Fuck it. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening. And I probably left some other stuff out that I wanted to talk about. But if you didn't see my first video, you can check that out. I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to talk about the NPCs in Scholar of the First Sin, when they did the all the add-ons and update for, you know, with the graphics for Dark Souls 2. They did fucking the best thing they could have done, and that's with the summonable NPCs. In Dark Souls 3, the NPCs you interact with and the ones you can summon, really fucking, you have like, what, 6 times altogether that you can summon an NPC to help you. Dark Souls 2, especially with the Skull of the First Sin, you know, you have all your basic characters that are just fantastic that you can't wait to meet again and kind of advance the story with, you know, like Benhart. He's, you know, a big one. I think I talked about some of these other people in my first video. But the oddball, random NPCs that you can summon. You know, I can't even think of any of their names right now, but you have guys that hold torches that, you know, cast light spells, and that you can go through not just the boss with, but you can actually go through the whole level with, and they're put there so you can go through the level with them. That's awesome. You don't see that in Dark Souls 1 or Dark Souls 2. Sorry, Dark Souls 3. But that just, to me, that was another awesome thing they added, you know, just, it's like, man, that's just what I wanted, to be able to kind of interact with, you know, outside of just the boss fight. If you don't want a PvE, PvP, you know, co-op with somebody, you can at least have some help going through a level. It just kind of makes it interesting. Yeah, I guess that's about it. I'll shut up now, and if you haven't played Dark Souls 2 recently, go back and play it, and you'll see what I mean. You know, I think you'll remember, you know, you'll start to notice things and say, damn, why did they take that away in Dark Souls 3? Or, you know, why didn't they keep things this way? Yeah. Again, this is Cadmus. Thanks for watching.